get ready before we get started. So go ahead and jump into chat, say hi, introduce yourself, and we'll get started in just a minute. I always like to scroll through the list and see if I've met any of you in person. I don't think I see anyone yet. Austin, Texas. David, you got to stop by our office and harass our executives so that they do what you want. Don't tell them I said that. Got people from all over. All right, it does look like the numbers are slowing down a little bit, so I think we can go ahead and jump in and get started. Again, welcome to today's open office hours. This is our usually monthly opportunity for you as partners to come in and ask our brilliant Jeff how to do things better in Ninja. If you've been here before, you know this is an interactive session. We don't really have any content prepared. We come in and ask you to ask us questions on how to use Ninja better, how to get more out of the platform, and to hear from others about how they're getting value out of Ninja and what they're doing. So if you do have questions, if you have things you want us to cover, if you want to learn how to do something better, we do ask you to throw that information in chat and Q&A. We do prioritize questions in Q&A first. So if you do have something you want us to cover, go ahead and put that in there now, and people can upvote it so we can prioritize the ones people are interested in. If you do have questions about sort of the roadmap, or if you have support questions, we do ask that you reach out to your account manager about those things, or to support for support questions. But because we want to focus on things that are broadly going to add value to everyone here. Before we jump into the actual office hours, I do want to just briefly go over our most recent release. I'll touch on it very briefly. It's only available in our EMEA and OC instances. But before any of that, let's go ahead and introduce the team. Jeff?
Hi, my name is Jeff Hunter, and I am the Sales Engineer Manager for the MSP channel at Ninja One.
Congratulations, Jeff. I got to update your title on here.
Didn't even notice
my
that.
name's Pete Breton. I am the Director of Product Marketing here at Ninja One.
My name's Lindsay McChesney. I'm the Training and Development Manager here at Ninja One.
And I'm Lydia Ruggiero, and I'm the Account Manager here for the internal IT side.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to update your title, but separate from that, let's jump into the most recent release. Super quick here. For those of you who are on our EMEA or OC instances, these are available today. If you are in the North America instance, these will be coming in January. Really great updates here. So we are releasing our Mac third-party application patching to open beta, so it will be available to all customers. This and the Linux patching update are, because they're in beta, you do need to reach out to your account manager and get them turned on. So with Mac third-party patching, we're covering a little over, I think, 100 applications where we can install and patch those applications automatically like we do with our Windows third-party application patching. And then for our Linux patching, it is a little bit less robust than Windows patching, but the same GUI-based patching for Linux operating systems. And if it is, I think if it's a Yum or Yum-based Linux platform, it can also do third-party applications that are in the repository you're pointing at. So Linux OS and third-party application patching there as well. We are also releasing a much requested per organization system tray icon, which we know has been, a request for 5 to 10 years, I think. So that will be available in the 5.3.7 release. And then for ticketing, we have the ability to tag technicians, so you can call them into a ticket, ask them for help, or hand it off. And then finally, you will notice, you won't see them in the environment we're sharing today, but if you're in EMEA or OC, some significant UI improvements, particularly around drop-down menus and the device deployment menu. So with that, we can hand it off to you guys for your questions, and I'll hand it off to Jeff to share his screen. Cassie, can we put Jeff's screen on? Awesome.
All right.
All right, let's dive right in. First question I'll throw out there is from Mark. Mark is wondering how to properly exclude the D and E drive from a disk space free condition, I believe, in the policy. If we could go over that, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the syntax here can be it can vary from machine to machine. What I have found works the best broadly across a lot of different machines is just doing the drive letter and then a colon. So if we go into administration and then into policies, inside your policy here, you could make an exclusion for a couple different conditions, but the one we're going to look at specifically right now will be for low disk space right here. And if we click into that, we can see the option to exclude a volume label. So in this instance, I would go ahead and add in the D drive and the E drive here. If you're still experiencing issues with that, we would want to take a closer look and see why that's happening. I also wanted to talk about how you can tailor this to individual machines instead of doing it at the policy at large. So if we cancel out of our actual policy here, you actually have the ability to make device level overrides of any of the policy conditions. So if I wanted to go to a very specific machine, which I'll pick at random, our BitLocker example right here, you can then go into the device settings. And inside the device settings, you'll see two options. One is to change the entire policy that this device is currently assigned to. And I always like to show that one out because right below it is a similar but extremely different option, which is policy overrides. And policy overrides allow you to change the individual settings for the policy that's currently assigned to this device. So if I click into it, I'll see that I have the device name in the top left, and then I can come in and actually tailor my conditions for this device on this device only without making changes to my policy at large, while also not having to create an entirely new policy to make a relatively minor tweak. So this is great for specific device one-offs. At this point, I could come down and do exactly what I did earlier, find my low disk space alert, and the exclusion that I'm going to add here is only going to be applicable to this particular device rather than all devices on the policy. So a couple different ways to get there. Like I said, I would recommend doing just the drive letter and then a colon, not a quotation mark, but a colon. And then if you're still experiencing issues with that, we would definitely want to take a closer look. I know you mentioned a different option in there for an underscore like D underscore drive. That is kind of dependent on the volume label here. This is what I found has the most broad success across a lot of devices.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and great call out there for the policy level overrides for making those tweaks to things that could be slightly different from a device-to-device basis without having to make a whole new policy. Really appreciate it. Next up, so just while we're on the topic of policies and conditions, I see Lonnie had a question here that they added a condition to a parent policy and noticed that in the child policy, it came in as inherited and checked. Is that the default behavior for a child policy when you have that parent-child policy relationship?
Yeah, really good question, and it is. Whenever you add a condition into a policy, by default, it is going to be active and checked on your sub policies. Now, if you're looking to prevent that from happening, what you can do is come into your policies here, and I'll go to my parent, which in this case is going to be Windows Workstations here at the very bottom. And so if I wanted to add something in, but I didn't want it to automatically be enabled on all the child policies, what I could do is add a condition in here. And then after I create the condition, I'll save myself a little bit of time here in demonstrating that. But what I would do is I would actually just uncheck it prior to saving. And then that uncheck would carry down to all your child policies so they wouldn't have it enabled by default. That changes your workflow from being auto on for everybody to being auto off for everybody, all the child policies, I should say. So that in that workflow, you would go into your child policies and then you would manually enable the condition for the companies that or the devices that you wanted to have that setting apply to. So that would be the way to have it not be on by default. But yeah, if you do add in a condition and you do have it enabled at the parent level, it is going to be active and all the child policies set to inherit from that parent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Changing topic a little bit to the API. Daniel's wondering if we could go over what fields are required to submit tickets via Ninja's API.
That one I might not have off the top of my head in terms of what is going to be required, but what I can show you is by going into the App Exchange here and then into API, you'll see a section down here, Documentation version 2.0 new. We can then click on View, which will give us the opportunity to check out the documentation. I can't say that I've specifically looked at the ticketing documentation recently, so I'm not sure if we denote there what the required fields are. But if we come down even further, you can see that we have a couple different endpoints for ticketing. We can see down here the ability to create or modify a ticket in the management section, but then below that, you'll see the ability to actually pull more information from ticketing, like a list of all your tickets. So I apologize. I don't have that information about what would specifically be required off the top of my head. What I would recommend is if you email, I believe, api@ninjarmm.com. That would be a good way to get some clarity on that from our API experts, of which I am not one of. So apologies for that.
I think that might be our first Jeff Stumper of the year.
Got it in under the wire.
And it's almost the end of the year. So that's pretty good, Jeff.
Almost.
Yeah, good point about reaching out to that API email group. That'll also be helpful. I'm sure if there is information that needs to be added to the documentation to clarify that, they can get that information in the right place too. All right, let's move on to our next question here. We have a question from Tom. Tom is wondering if there is a way to trigger an email or a notification to be sent when a new device is ready for manual approval. I think we're talking about node approval here. Do we have like an activity for that, Jeff?
I'm checking. I believe we do. Actually, it doesn't look like we have anything specifically for the device being in pending, but I do believe if you use the device created system notification here, that will trigger when a device has been added. Now, I'd say the issue with this is that if you have anybody who's an automatic approval, you're probably going to get the notifications for these, and it's not going to be just devices that are currently in pending. But this would give you at least some visibility on all the devices that have been added to your environment. But I don't think we have a specific activity for when a device is in the pending section for node approval. We would just have to look for any devices being created as a way to maybe trigger us to look at the node approval section on the dashboard, which you will see right here.
Thank you, Jeff. And yeah, that's I think could be a good feature request too for having a notification specifically for that pending device rather than having them for all devices. So an interesting point there for sure. Let's see here.
I am making a mental note of that. So I will reach out to our PM team on that because that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. Next question I want to ask. So this is kind of a roadmap question. So I don't know if anybody here has an answer, but I've just seen it come up both in the chat and in the Q&A. So I figured let's check and see if anybody does have any information about this here. Does anybody have a status update on our Bitdefender? I see one here for the EDR integration, one for Gravity Zone integration. Pete, I don't know if you have any more information there.
Sorry, Jeff. I'll take this. So as of right now, Bitdefender Gravity Zone is officially in closed beta. So we do have customers on it. It obviously, anything that touches on your security, we need to make sure it's perfect before you get it. So I think we have about 50 customers using it, really kicking the tires to make sure it does everything we expect it to do, that the behavior is as expected. The next step is to move it into open beta, and that's when it will be available to everyone. We will send out an email when it is available. I have to assume this will be in. It won't be this year. It'll be next year. But I've heard really good things about where it is and the state that it's in. I'm very reluctant to give you a date because I don't want to give you a date and then have you yell at Lydia when we don't hit that date. So we do have customers on it kicking the tires, but I can't give you a date today.
Thanks for the insight there, Pete. The next question, again, shifting topics a little bit, I want to ask a question from Michael here regarding cloud monitors. Michael's wondering if it's possible to test from client locations in addition to Ninja AWS servers. And as some context here, Michael's saying this would be helpful when tracking performance across locations and isolating web accessibility issues.
Yeah, that's a very interesting use case. I mean, I'll say just to be transparent about it, we wouldn't be able to do that today. The cloud monitors are hard coded to go from Ninja's AWS instance to whatever URL or IP address that you specify. There's no way to have essentially a different source or origination point for that. One thing that could be done with that potentially would be just regular NMS, assuming that you do have network access. You could, go ahead and set up something tracking maybe net flow, between two locations. But yeah, for cloud monitors, I can't say that that's going to work for the cloud monitor aspect of it. That would have to be a feature request. I can check in on that, but yeah, I think the best bet would be to use maybe something like our NMS agent to track performance between different IP addresses, because you get a better ability to control what the origination point is based on where the NMS agent is installed versus cloud monitors, which, like I said, you're kind of locked into using AWS.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to hop over to a question coming in from the chat. This question is from Alex. Alex is wondering if there are any tips for getting Ninja scripts to play nicely with ThreatLocker. Have you spoken to any customers who are using both products, and kind of have any best practices that you can share regarding running scripts from Ninja with that, Jeff?
Yeah, this has come up in the past, I know. One thing I always recommend is whitelisting. We do have our whitelist document available in the dojo here. Just go to the top right of your Ninja console. You'll see the question mark there, and the very top link is dojo/community. And the whitelist doc here that I will post in the chat. This is going to be a good section here to see where we store our agent, our patcher, both items that you might need to whitelist in order to have scripts operate properly. You might also need to whitelist the Ninja process in general. I would be very curious to see what other people in the field are doing. I don't have a lot of depth into what people are doing in their ThreatLocker instances. So if anybody does have anything that they'd like to share in the chat, please do so, just to give a little bit more detail on what you're whitelisting and what you're having to deal with ThreatLocker.
Yeah, and on that note too, I would highly recommend checking out our script share section of the community, or even just like best practices section of the community, and kind of searching through there for any existing conversations about ThreatLocker. But that's also a great way to start a conversation and try to get some insight from other Ninja users who may be experiencing similar things as well.
And one thing that might be beneficial is to know that the method through which Ninja does initiate and execute scripts is always going to be through CMD. So even if it's a PowerShell script, it's calling CMD and then executing the PowerShell command. So just a little note on the backend architecture there of how the scripts are being initiated. That might be handy as well, and what you need to whitelist in ThreatLocker.
Good call out. Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm going to hop back over to the Q&A for another question. We have a user who's trying to find a group of devices with a specific Windows service installed and running. They're looking in search, but not finding an additional filter for Windows services. What would you say would be the best way to accomplish this, Jeff?
Yeah, no, and we actually have a really good example for this. So when we come to the search menu, you're absolutely right, is that there's nothing built in for Windows services. Now, peek behind the curtain, I can say that this is on our roadmap. So we are going to be adding this in 2023 as a dedicated services filter. However, for this and for anything else that we don't have as a filter in here, you have a really robust workaround, which is going to be custom fields. Batch, PowerShell, Shell, those all support custom fields within Ninja, and that means that you can use those languages to write the output of whatever the script is looking for and write that into a custom field. And then you have the ability to search within that custom field. That is effectively going to give you the ability to search for whatever you're looking to monitor here. As an example, and we actually already have something for this. This is actually something we've talked about on previous editions of Office Hours. I know initially, right after we launched the custom fields feature, one of the scripts that I posted was one that does exactly this. It takes a list of services and writes it into a custom field. Now, one thing I didn't realize in my initial script here is that this includes a lot of white space padding, which you'll see a lot of people finding out in the comments here. And so thankfully, somebody helpfully posted this script right here, which actually takes out all the extra padding. So we don't run into a character limit based on just random white space filling up our character limit. I'm going to go ahead and link this in the chat right here. No, actually not in the Q&A. I'll put it in the chat. So with this script, we could go ahead and write that into our custom field. You can see that at the very top here, we're creating our services variable. We're using the get service commandlet to pull a list of all the services. We're sorting them alphabetically by name, and then we're choosing to show just the name. That way we don't show any miscellaneous information like whether it's enabled or disabled, whether it's manual start or automatic start. The second line here is just taking that information we've collected and we're converting it into a string. Ninja's custom fields don't read PowerShell objects directly, so you do have to convert it into a string so that we can actually read it. Otherwise, it's going to look kind of like nonsense. The third line is the important part that takes out all the additional white space padding that you can see right here in this screenshot. So that way it looks more like this screenshot right here where there's none of that extra white space. You might potentially run into the 10,000 character limit for multi-line fields if we didn't have this little bit of code in there. So big thank you to Alexander Michael. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. And then down here, you can see the actual code to write this into a custom field, Ninja property set, writing into the services field, and then using the variable that we create above. Now you can go ahead and just run this across all of your machines. Let's say I select all of my Windows devices here. I could just go ahead and select everything and then initiate a script across all of them. Alternatively, you could go ahead and actually look for the absence of information being filled into that custom field. So that way, on a recurring basis, you're using Ninja's scheduled tasks to look for any machines that don't have any information populated in that custom field. And then we'll go ahead and run the script to populate the information. Now, in this particular case, I would go ahead and search my services field. I would look for anybody who's containing the service that I'm looking for. In this example, I'll just go ahead and say I'm looking for anybody with an RDP service installed. And so now that takes me from 29 machines down to just the 6 machines that have some type of RDP service installed on them. So this was, again, a great way to pull the specific ask here, I know, for the services that are installed on a machine, but this is also great for anything else that you might want to capture. Custom fields, there's a million possibilities because, they are custom. Anything that you could do with Batch or PowerShell, this is now going to be something that you can use as search criteria within Ninja. And then that also gives you another vector for automation. If you're looking to find particular machines and run scripts across machines with particular services, we can then use the search menu here, create our search group. And then if we go into administration and tasks down here, we can then go ahead and set up a task to run across any of the groups that we select right here. And then if we go into targets, you'll see three options, the top 2 of which are static, organization and device. So you have to individually select the orgs or devices that you want to have that group, the script apply to. But the third option down here at the bottom, the search groups, those are dynamic based on the search criteria that you enter in the search menu we were just at. So this is a great way to dynamically target automations and scripts across devices and have Ninja do the heavy lifting by using those search filters to find the machines that meet the criteria that you're putting in place to have a script or automation run across them.
Thank you so much for that really thorough explanation, Jeff. And just a couple of call outs that I wanted to make. One, Bob, I see you're asking if there's a guide in the dojo with this information. I actually just above linked a guide to, or a link to the how-to video that goes over the process that Jeff just covered on creating a filter for devices based on installed services. So please check that out as well. One other thing I wanted to call out was a comment from Ben with another workaround that I actually hadn't thought of before, where you could set up a condition that doesn't actually alert to anything when the service you're looking for is detected and running. And then in your search, you could look for that specific condition. So that's an interesting workaround as well that sounds like could be used. I see you're going through the steps here, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't have to necessarily look for if the service is running or not running. We have added in the ability to see if the service either exists or doesn't exist. This is also something that can be helpful when you're looking for if a particular application is installed. I know that some applications, I think ThreatLocker might even be one of them, they don't actually install as an application. So you might need to look for the presence of a service or for a specific file in order to determine whether it's installed or not. So more so than just identifying machines with a particular service installed, this can also be used as kind of a backdoor way to check if a particular application is installed as well.
Awesome. And I want to jump over to actually an additional question that came in from the chat, just because it is fairly similar to the kind of line of thought with looking at these Windows services. Randy was asking how to find out if any machines have TikTok installed. What would be the best practice for identifying if particular software is installed on a machine, Jeff?
Yeah, there are a couple different ways to do it. I'll say the quickest and easiest way is just going to be to go to the top level of the dashboard. And then under the software tab, you'll see a menu option for inventory. And we come into the inventory menu here. We do have the ability to limit down to a particular OS to search. In this case, I'm just going to choose Windows. Now, I don't think we have TikTok installed on any of these machines here. No, it doesn't appear that we do. Type, that'd be great. Yeah, so no TikTok on these machines, but you can see an example of something like Spotify right here. Now, we do show distinct line items here for different versions of the application. So in the case of Spotify, different version numbers, which is why we're seeing two distinct line items. And then I can always click on the machine over here, the number in the devices column, which will then give me a list of all these machines. Now, if you're looking for something a little bit more centralized, I would recommend coming into the software, the additional filters here, and then typing in software inventory. The benefit of this is that you'll be able to see the machines with TikTok installed just in one central list, as opposed to having them be in multiple lists, like we saw from the other inventory menu. And in this case, I would look for all time, any machines containing any version of whatever the software happens to be. I'll use Spotify here just because, like I said, we don't have TikTok on any of these. And so here I can see, all right, here's the two machines that have Spotify installed. Now, again, I could save this as a search group here, and I can go ahead and say has Spotify. Go ahead and run a scheduled task to run a script to remove it if I wanted to. And this is ideal because with these scheduled tasks, you can set them up to recur every day, every week, or every month. So this can actually be a recurring check to identify any machines that have the desired application installed or undesired application, perhaps, and then run a script to uninstall it. Now, one thing I want to be clear on here is that our software inventory does only look in specific registry locations. We have those in our dojo here. If you go to the software inventory dashboard menu document in our dojo, you will see the registry locations that we do monitor. One that we do not monitor is going to be the HKCU registry. So anything that's installed on a per user basis is not something that's likely going to show in our software inventory menu. And that goes back to what I was speaking about earlier, which is that not every application installs in the same spot. So in this case, if TikTok, and I have no idea how TikTok actually installs, I didn't even know there was a desktop application. If you do install that, it may be in a location that we don't detect. So you might need to write a script or look in a more specific location to see if it's actually there, and then we can take action on it. And like I said, ThreatLocker operates a similar way, where it doesn't actually install as a program, so we wouldn't be able to detect it through this menu here. We would have to we would have to write a script that checked for the presence of the ThreatLocker exe in a particular location, or we'd have to monitor for the service being installed, and that would be what we would key on to say, hey, okay, this application is installed on this machine, even though it's not showing up in add remove programs.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Yeah, I'm seeing chatter that TikTok isn't showing up in the software list even when installed. So it'd probably be best to pursue one of those avenues, like either looking for a service running or using a custom script or one of those other options that you mentioned for that particular software. All right, let's hop back over to the Q&A. I have a question here from Jeremy. We're going to kind of switch topics over to ticketing. Jeremy is wondering, when setting up the custom SMTP server for ticketing, can they specify a username that's different from the email/reply address, or is that on the roadmap? And I actually have an answer to this, Jeff, if you don't have an answer.
I don't think you can, but yeah, Lindsay, please educate me.
So actually, it's funny timing because I just learned about this yesterday, but we do not currently have the ability to specify a username, but that is something that is currently being worked on and will likely be included in our next release sometime through January or February. So that is a feature that is coming.
And just to be transparent with everybody on the call, I know that I've been seeing a lot of chatter around this feature, specifically for any Office 365 users. I know that Office 365 by default uses a modern authentication, and currently we don't support that with the SMTP relay that we're using here. So probably not going to be able to use Office 365 with the SMTP relay at this time. That is absolutely on our roadmap. It's one of the next things that they're working on for the ticketing system. So we expect to see that early next year. But yeah, for now, modern authentication, if you're using that with Office 365, and there's a very good chance that you are, that's not something that we're going to be able to support at this time.
Thank you so much, Jeff. This is another interesting ticketing question that I don't think currently exists functionality for this, but I'm curious if I'm wrong or if you have any idea here, Jeff. Bradley's wondering if there's a way to link a document as the like quote unquote solution to a ticket so that they can tell which documents are actually being used to resolve tickets.
So the short answer is no, but we are working in that direction, and I can actually show you what is going to be kind of the the base of that. It's something we're developing in conjunction with our documentation platform here. If we go into documentation, you'll see, of course, the different forms you can use to store institutional knowledge tied to a particular customer at the organization level. We're also adding in checklists here, so that way you can go ahead and assign checklists to users and make sure tasks are being done in an appropriate way. But we are also adding in a knowledge base feature. And so this is in a closed beta right now, as well as the checklist feature. If you're interested in trialing any of those features, giving them a try, please reach out to your account manager so we can get that turned on for you. But if I go into an organization here, you'll see that in this environment, I have my apps and services. That, of course, is the institutional knowledge I'm storing in my custom fields. I have my checklist, but then I also have my knowledge base. And so here's where I can go ahead and add in documents. You can see folders here. I can add in documents. Now, right now, this is technicians only. So you have to be a Ninja technician to see this information. There's not really any ability. I'll just there's no ability to have this sent to somebody else who's not in the Ninja system as a technician. But we are headed in that direction. So ultimately, we will be able to take the knowledge base articles that we're storing in here, and then provide a link for that. I think it's an interesting item that you brought up there in terms of being able to track what are the most used and viewed documents. I'm going to try to make a mental note of that as well and pass that to our documentation team because I think that would be a very useful metric to make sure we're including in this product. So the short answer is no, we can't do that today, but you can see here we are working in that direction, and this is something that we have on our roadmap for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And I have one more ticketing question I'm going to toss you, Roy, while we're on the topic. Daniel's wondering if there's a way to import end users. They have over 400 end users and want to utilize the ticketing system. And at this point, it would take hours to enter them manually and then manually assign them to their devices.
Daniel, I feel your pain. Fortunately, we do have something to reduce the amount of data entry that you would have to be doing. Now, it is contingent on making those end users tied to a specific organization. And to be honest, I think that's how the vast majority of end users are set up today. So I don't think that should be an issue. But if you are looking to import global end users who can connect to multiple organizations, we can't import them. However, if they're only ever going to access devices in a specific organization, we can come into the organization itself. And then over on the left-hand side, you'll see two options. One is for end users, which is your specific question. And you can see the option to import end users in the very top right there. This just requires you to copy and paste from a spreadsheet. We just need 3 columns: first name, a last name, and email address. With those 3 columns, we can go ahead and create everybody. And at that point, you'll see them all populate in here as users. All their invitations would be sent out. All you would need to do at that point is assign them devices. Fortunately, you have this menu right here. So if you have quite a few end users, it's very easy to come in here and assign them, to the particular the devices to the particular user. So that's what I would recommend for all your organizational end users, which, like I said, is the vast majority of what I see. Now, what I mean by an organizational end user is we have a different type of end user that's a global end user. And the only difference between a organizational end user and a global end user is the pool of devices that you can select from. Obviously, if somebody's tied to an organization, they'll only be able to access the devices that you've assigned them, but you're only going to be able to assign them the devices for that specific organization. I'd contrast that with a global end user. This person can be assigned devices from any organization across the board. However, like I said, that's going to be a more limited use case than having people be tied to a specific organization. I'd say this is more for, you have somebody maybe in my past, I had to grant access to an HVAC guy. So the HVAC controls guy could access the machine where the HVAC control system was operating, and he could go ahead and make changes for that. And so because those would traverse different organizations, I could go ahead and give him access to devices in multiple organizations. But like I said, most of you, I think, are probably only going to create end users that are tied to a particular organization. Now, if you are looking just to store contact information, you can see that we allow you to store contacts as well. And we do have an import for that at the organization level too. So if you come into the organization section and then go down to contacts, we can also import anybody as a contact. Similar to the end user sharing, just copy and paste 3 columns from that spreadsheet. Now, of course, a contact doesn't have any login capability into Ninja. It's just a placeholder to store their contact information. End users, of course, can log in the Ninja, and it'll look a little something like this when they do log in. This is me logged into the exact same portal. It's just a different username and account. And you can see it's a way more limited form of access. This can be used to submit tickets and manage tickets, of course. It can be used as a self-service portal for Ninja Backup. And its primary usage, I would say, is built around remote access. So you can grant and delegate remote access to your end users at no additional cost.
We have one additional follow-up question to this, Jeff. This came in from Tim. I'm wondering if a end user's organization can be changed after it's initially set.
Great question, and it can. You would have to delete them and then recreate them. So yes, I would definitely make sure that you're getting it right from the start, because there is no way to modify an organizational user to a global end user or vice versa after the fact. You have to do it at the time of creation.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm going to shift the topic away from ticketing here and take a question we have in the chat from Nicole. Nicole's wondering the best way to monitor Windows system event or security logs.
Yeah. So if we go into a policy here, you'll see that we do allow you to trigger off of event IDs. So any event IDs that are security related, you can go ahead and input them in here, as well as the source, which might be security or security auditing. And then we can further limit what noise we're seeing from those event IDs by limiting the text filtering here. So we can look for events that trigger, that contain or do not contain certain text that we specify in here. And we can also trigger if the occurrence goes above a certain threshold. So let's say we're monitoring for the event ID, which we can see here in our templates for a failed user login. And this is letting us know anytime somebody has failed to log into Windows. Let me come down here. Where did I put it? There we go. Failed login attempts. Now, of course, we're monitoring the event ID here. Now, this might trigger if somebody just typos their password. So what I might want to do here is change it so that somebody has to typo their password 2 or 3 times in 5 minutes, which gives me a better indication that somebody is, attempting to brute force this system, or somebody's clearly doesn't know the password that they're trying to log into here. So this is a good option to kind of limit the noise that you're seeing there. I would highly recommend taking a look at, and Pete and Lindsay, you might be able to help me out with this. I think we do have a document that calls out some event IDs that are useful for this exact scenario. So if anybody knows where that document is, that would be very helpful if we could link that. But I think we do have a document that shows common security event IDs. So I would recommend coming in here and adding those in to alert on any changes in security settings, maybe a particular user being elevated into the administrators group or something of that nature. That can be very useful for keeping track of your environment.
Actually, Jeff, a lot of those are in the templates if you want to show those off.
Are they?
I think we added
that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
So we have some of these here, and then down here we have security. Oh, there we go. So we can see that we've added in user account being created or enabled, disabled or deleted, some sort of password change. So as much visibility as you're looking to get here, we go ahead and see there's been modifications to a security group here, member added to a security group. So a lot, I haven't checked the section in a while. We have made a lot of updates. So yeah, would highly recommend checking this out. Looks like we have most of what you're going to need in here from a security perspective. So yeah, please check out the templates inside of policies and see what is going to be useful to monitor in your environment.
And I just went ahead and put a link to the document that does cover our templates in here. This can just be a helpful way if you want to see all of the templates in one place and be able to really easily kind of go and search for particular keywords and stuff like that. This document can help as far as listing out those templates and kind of what they entail as well. So I put that in the chat. Thank you so much, Jeff. Next up, I want to queue up a couple of roadmap related questions. The first one is regarding the SentinelOne integration. Pete, any ETA and when we should expect that?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who are not aware, we are actively building an integration with SentinelOne. As of today, we can resell SentinelOne to our MSP partners. Unfortunately, It is for MSPs only. If you're internal IT and want to purchase SentinelOne, you'd have to go direct to them. But for our MSP partners, you can purchase SentinelOne through us. But better news, other than getting us paid for SentinelOne, is the ability to integrate Ninja with SentinelOne, regardless of whether you're purchasing it through us. So in 537, NA is again coming in Q1. We are pushing that to closed beta, so it'll be about 25 to 50 partners who will be using it. Again, kicking the tires, making sure it works as expected, making sure the functionality is what you need. And then after that, usually when we get to around 50 users, 50 customers, we then push it to open beta, assuming that it's stable, reliable, and meets the requirements of our customers. So you're probably looking at late Q1, early Q2, although, again, I can't promise that because it'll depend entirely on those beta testers' feedback. I can say it is very far along in development. I could show it if there's interest in you seeing what the integration looks like today. But that's about as far as I could say.
Thank you, Pete. I lied. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. David asked here, I wish you allowed SentinelOne and Webroot to be integrated from your own accounts. I'm not going to repeat the rest of that, David. For SentinelOne, you will be able to bring your own license. You won't have to purchase through us. You will be able to integrate based on whatever license you bring. Sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
Awesome, thank you. I was going to say I lied to you and I said I had 2 roadmap related questions, but I actually have 3. So that'll serve as the first one. The next couple I wanted to ask about, one is in the Q&A from Josh. Josh sees MDM listed in development on the roadmap. Do we have any ETA on when that functionality is being released?
No, we did do a demo of our MDM feature at our last major summit, ITX. I can actually link to that really briefly here. So you can see what it looks like. We currently are in really good shape for our Android integration for MDM and are actively building out our Mac iOS integration. I don't have date. It's going to depend on entirely on development and when we can get our Mac/iOS integration built and fully functional. So I don't have a date, but if you watch towards the end of this video here, I just linked it, you will be able to see what the integration looks like today.
Awesome. And one more roadmap question for you, Pete. This has come up, I think, in the chat and in the Q&A. Folks are wondering if there's any news on a Raspberry Pi agent.
Yes, good news on that one. I actually just talked to the product manager for that product. It's coming along very, very well. I believe, again, that will be going into closed beta in early Q1. And then, again, it goes through the whole process of, 50 customers, kicking the tires, making sure that it's working as anticipated, and then it goes into open beta. My understanding is that we have very high confidence that will move to open beta quickly, though. And so it's not just
awesome.
we're going to build it. It's actively under development and testing.
Very cool. Thank you so much for all of those, Pete. I appreciate it. I have one more question I'm going to ask from the chat, and then I'll hop back over to Q&A. I have a question that came in from Tony. I know that you mentioned in the very beginning, Pete, kind of the upcoming features that we had in our 537 release, one of which was Mac third-party patch management in an open beta. Would it be too difficult? Do we have the ability to show what that setup process looks like in like an OC or EU environment by chance?
It's actually in the environment Jeff has open right now. He can show it right in there with Linux and Mac.
Oh, perfect. Even better. And Jeff, I'm not sure if you're talking, but if you are, I think you're muted.
I was muted. My bad. So you can see that we now have a new option here. We have the patching option over on the left-hand side. Before, we were initiating everything as a script. Now, in some cases, this wasn't actually like pure shell that was running. It was compiled code. But we're bringing this over to sort of match what we do on the Windows side. So feature parity with what we've done on the Windows side for a while, bringing that to Linux and then ultimately to Mac as well. You can see the scan schedule and update schedule, the reboot options, very, very similar to what we see on the Windows side. And this is only going to improve the reporting that we can offer on Linux patches as well. And if I close out of here and go into a Mac device, we'll see that with a Mac device, we have added a new software tab over on the left-hand side. So this is the third-party patching, much like our Windows third-party patching. This is powered by our integration with Avanti. It does have different applications available for it versus the Windows side of things. So you can see here everything that we allow you to patch through Mac devices here. Similar to the ability with the Windows side, you can't add in your own applications. This is a predefined list that is being provided by Avanti, so no customization of what you can patch here. But yeah, this has been great to finally bring this out after having it on the Windows side for a while.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And for anybody who's interested, I did also just put a link in the chat to the Mac third-party software patch management documentation. We also have Linux documentation, even though it has been pushed to the US instance of Ninja quite yet. You still are able to check out and review that documentation in advance while we wait for that release to be rolled out to all instances. I see Tony is also asking a follow-up if we have an ETA on when this will be pushed out. Pete, do you have an ETA on that?
Yeah, we don't do big releases in December. We have a pact in blood with our development team that doesn't allow us to push out big releases in December. So I believe it's ready to go, and it will be, because we've already pushed it to OC and EU, so it should be in January unless something major happens.
Awesome.
I always like to leave a caveat a little out in case we don't hit that, but it should be in January.
Yes, better be safe than sorry. All right. On the note of patching, I actually have a patching question from the Q&A here for you, Jeff. Randall is wondering if there's a way to check the last and next planned patching update applied through the Ninja agent on both a per machine or per organization basis.
Yeah, so we definitely can check on some of that. I don't think we have anything for the next planned patching schedule, but if we go to the actual device level, in the very middle here, well, I picked a bad example. Let's find a machine that's actually being patched. Here we can see when the last patch scan has occurred right there. Now, if you're looking to search for this more broadly, we can go to the search menu, and you also have the ability here. If we scroll down to the very bottom to see when the last time an OS patch was installed and when the last time we scanned for OS patches. So if you're looking to see anybody who's potentially out of date, out of compliance, this is a great way to identify those machines. However, for sort of seeing more at the organization level, the success of patching, I would recommend reporting. If we go to administration and then down to the reporting section, you can see the ability to report either globally. In this particular case, I would recommend using the organization report. And one of the reports we include here is patch compliance. And the patch compliance is going to let you know who's had issues with scans. Was their last scan successful, or was their last scan a failure? So that is a great option to kind of see the status of your entire organization in one spot, as opposed to going to the individual device level or even using the search menu to see anybody who's been out of compliance for a while. This gives you, I think, probably the best and most up-to-date information about who's had recent patch scan failures or issues installing patches.
Thank you, Jeff. Changing topics again to talking about NMS. Question from Evan here. Is there a way to enable NMS from a machine that already has the regular Ninja agent installed on it? It seems like it has to be manually installed and then requires a tech to log into the NMS software itself.
Yeah, no, that is unfortunately the way that we're operating today. You do have to install the thick agent and configure it locally. The good news is that the next feature that's going to be released for network monitoring is to make it operate the exact way that you mentioned. So instead of using the thick agent, we're going to deprecate that, and everything is going to be configured from the cloud. So you'll be able to designate a network probe and say, this is going to be what looks for all the NMS devices. And so everything will be managed to the cloud. It'll be much easier, cleaner setup. We probably are not going to see that until I'd say midway through next year. So that is an extensive ongoing project. So nothing today on that note, but light at the end of the tunnel for sure.
Thank you so much. Next question is from Matt. Matt's wondering if there are options to enable a 24-hour clock in Ninja. So for things like scheduling scripts or scheduled for tasks, etc., instead of the default 12-hour AM PM setting.
I don't think we have that capability. I think everything is a 12-hour clock that depends on the locale that you set. I don't think that there's the ability to change this to display the time in a different manner. What I will say is that I think everything by default that shows in the activities feed here, um, over here, not this right here, but what you'll actually see in terms of a timestamp in the actual notes of the activity feed, I think that's logged in GMT. But yeah, I don't think there's any way to change this section right here to be a 24-hour clock, at least not to my knowledge. Lindsay, do you know anything else about that?
Yeah, I don't think so. I was thinking about that as I was reading the question, and I don't think there's a way to do that right now, but I could certainly see that being a helpful feature request.
Definitely. That's our American bias showing, I think.
Totally. Um, Next question is from Evan regarding native scripts. So under the native scripts, there's a Windows service script which allows you to start and stop a service, but it doesn't have a restart option. I don't know if you know if that's something we have planned, Jeff, or if you have any kind of creative workarounds to be able to restart a service.
Nothing creative, but I have a very uncreative one, which is just to stop it and then start it again. That is typically how you would do it in command line, is you would do like a net stop and then a net start. So yeah, that would be what I would recommend, is just running those scripts one right after the other, one to stop and then one to start.
That makes sense. I'm going to hop over to the chat for a question that just came in from Stephen. Stephen's wondering if you can export activity field data yet. I'm asking this because I think I might have seen it come through earlier as well. Can you show us the activities dashboard and kind of cover that quickly, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. And activities get stored in a few different places. Uh, One would be at the general overview page right here. Over on the right, we can see activities. But the limitation of this is that this is a scroll. It's going to show you what's occurred most recently, but you really don't have any options to search short of just Control F. However, we have added in the activity search dashboard, which allows you what I think is a more readable view. It looks more like a table. So it's easier to see, I think, but it also gives you more options to filter and look for the specific action that you want to find, even limit down to a particular time frame. We track this all for the last 3 months, so I can go and look for a specific week or a specific day. I can look for the specific type of action, maybe anything to do with Windows patching or OS patching, anything to do with my Bitdefender antivirus, anything to do with remote access sessions through Splashtop or TeamViewer. And then furthermore, I can go ahead and look for a very specific activity. So in this case, maybe I want to look, for when a user account has logged in. So right here, I'll see any instances of, well, this didn't go blank on me. We would see any instances of when we've seen somebody log in or log out, anything that you're looking for there. Now, anything that you limit down to, or if you just leave it completely unlimited, so that you're seeing everything over the last 3 months, you can export. And in the top right, this will export to a CSV. This is pretty common across the board within Ninja. Anything that looks like a table in the way that this does, you should see an export option in the top right. Uh, and I am just Matt is saying his activities feed is going blank as well. I do think that we are seeing a bug here. So Matt, if you wouldn't mind opening a ticket, would really appreciate that so we can get this fixed.
Thank you so much, Jeff. The next question is actually pertaining to a different dashboard, but our backup or Ninja data protection dashboard. So Ben is seeing in the dashboard that it's able to, they're able to see when data protection jobs are actively running, but wondering how to search on active Ninja data protection jobs that are running across all organizations.
So there's really no good way to search for them. Obviously, right here we can see anything that's actively running at the moment, but we wouldn't really have anything for the search menu to show you. Uh, you know, Devices that currently have backup jobs running. The closest we'd be able to get is if we wanted to say, show us anybody within the last day, for example, that has had a backup activity occur. And so we could say, hey, if a backup job has started here or a backup job is in progress, this would probably be the easiest way to limit it down. Let's see if we can. I know we don't have anybody who's actually running a backup job in this environment, so it's difficult to demonstrate. But that would be the only possibility I can think of to see any current active backup jobs. Now that being said, I are working on making this section over here clickable so that you are able to more directly find certain actions as they're running.
Ran a couple that if you want to show it off again, hopefully that works.
Let's come back in here.
It might take a minute.
Live demos, nothing like it.
Yeah, it might take as much as a minute, so we can move on.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes left, so let's take another question. Hopefully, we'll be able to demonstrate this before noon hits.
Sounds good. Next question is from Lonnie regarding kind of secure fields and scripts. So currently, Lonnie's aware that scripts only have write access to exchanged credentials, or I'm wondering if we're referring to like secure fields there.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if there's a reason why there is not read access. And I guess if that is something that's planned for the future. Lonnie's also wondering how secure the latter is and whether that information shows up in any logs.
Yeah, so to his second point there, we do show when anybody has revealed anything that's been contained within a secure field. So you will see an audit trail in the activities feed that we've been showing that will show you who revealed that information. And it is, of course, protected by MFA, so they do have to enter MFA in order to see what's contained in a secure field. Now, to your first point about read access, it's simply that we haven't built that functionality yet. We want to ensure that with your credentials, we're storing them securely, but passing them down to the agent and executing them securely is kind of a different kettle of fish. The good news is that we are currently working on that. I think last I heard, we expect to see that not in our next release in North America, which would be 5.3.7.
Jeff, you cut out there.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So that is going to be a short answer is the ability to read from secure custom fields is currently in development. It's going through extensive QA to make sure that we've got all our bases covered. We are currently targeting that for the 5.3.8 release, which is going to be hopefully sometimes towards the end of Q1. Is what we currently have slated. Of course, dates can slide, but that's what we're currently targeting for. So absolutely on a roadmap, actively being worked on. Can't wait to have that out because I know that there are a lot of requests to do things like set admin service account passwords and be able to securely pass those credentials down to the endpoint.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. And I guess we can check and see now if that job is running quickly. If not, I'll move on to the next question.
It is not.
Not quite. Okay, no problem. We are running to the end of time here. We have just a couple of minutes, but I'll pass the next question on the list here from Champ. Champ's wondering if you can show how to send notifications to Microsoft Teams. Is this possible? So it sounds like a notification channels thing. Jeff, could you show us that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to the apps section, you'll see notification channels. Now, if you don't see this, please reach out to your account manager or to our support team so that we can get it enabled for you. Everybody should be seeing this across the board. It is a GA feature at this point. So if you're not seeing that, please let us know. But what this will allow you to do is to configure alerts to be sent out to a couple different channels. Now, since you asked about Teams specifically, I'm going to say it's going to be a webhook. We redeveloped our webhooks earlier this year through notification channels to actually better work with Teams. And I believe we actually have a documentation article that specifically calls out how you can set up Teams using the notification channels. Lindsay, maybe you could link to that. Now, once you set up that notification channel and then go into our policies here, any of the conditions that you would want to have relayed into Teams, just come in here and then set the channel to send out the webhook to your Teams instance. Oh, Pete beat me to it.
Yep, I just dropped that in there, and I've gone through and followed that step by step. It makes it pretty easy to build it out.
And Lonnie brings up a good point. You could just have this done by emailing a Teams channel, so that's another option there. But webhooks would be a good option as well.
Awesome. I think we are at time. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully this was super helpful for you. We really enjoyed talking with you. Jeff, Lindsay, Lydia, thanks so much for doing all the heavy lifting here and chatting with everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next time. So hope everyone has a good holiday and good end of the year.